Do your workouts bug your arthritic knees? Do you find that going up and down stairs doesn't feel good for your knees, or trying to work out on your own, whether it's lifting weights or doing cardio, just seems to flare things up more than they already are? If so, listen up. There are some very specific things you can do with your workouts to not only help your knees start to function better, but make sure that your workouts are not making you worse. This is exactly what we're going to be discussing on today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast. We're going to cue the intro song, and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, exercisers? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to ask you if you've ever thought to yourself, wow, the information on the Exercise is Health podcast is so great, but how do I go about implementing it? This is a question that we've been hearing time and again from so many of you. And because of that, we have created something that you are going to absolutely love. And that is the One Workout Away Challenge. See, you are just one workout away from feeling stronger, from functioning better, and from living healthier. And over the course of 28 days, Julie and I want to teach you how. To learn more about the next One Workout Away Challenge and get signed up, go to owa.matschaumburg.com. And without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, one thing that we hear about so often from a lot of different people is just the experience that they have with exercise and their knees. Okay, when it comes to like arthritis throughout your body, knees are one of the more common areas that people start to develop arthritis. And when your knees start to become arthritic, it can really be challenging to find ways to exercise or just even move throughout your day that doesn't bug your knees. So if you find yourself in this situation right now, listen up, because there's actually some really simple things that you can do with your workouts to not only help to kind of calm your knees down, but help to make sure that things don't get worse and you continue to improve your health, continue to improve your strength, continue to improve your function with your workouts. And that's exactly what I want to talk with you about today.
You're right, Charlie. And I think the knee arthritis thing is a really tough one because a lot of us kind of start weighing our options, right? It's like, okay, should I just do nothing so that my knee feels better? Or should I try to do something and risk hurting them or making them feel worse, but there could be some benefit? I mean, what do I do? And that's where we find a lot of our clients. A lot of our clients come in and that'll be something that they're dealing with. And maybe they're doing something, but there's always like this giant laundry list of things that they're like, well, let's not do this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. There is some validity to that. I mean, you are living in your body. You know the things that hurt your knee, but also because of that, you also live with this tied emotion to it, right? So it's like when we see people with a giant list of things that they can't do or things they don't want to do because they're nervous about their knees, that's definitely something to take into consideration. It's also a list of things that you are leaving yourself vulnerable for, meaning if you don't strengthen things, they get weaker, meaning your body gets more vulnerable to injury when you're leaving out a list of things that you're not doing. So when we're talking about arthritic knees and how to, start taking action on it, at least in terms of an exercise perspective, it's important to be thinking about, yes, we want to keep you as comfortable as possible. We also need to keep you as strong as possible, because leaving your knees and really a giant chunk of your lower body vulnerable to weakness leaves you vulnerable to injury, which is also not what we want to be seeing.
Absolutely. That's really the catch-22 of it all is, yes, we're happy when people are like being smart about how they're exercising for their body and taking into consideration like how different exercises feel for their body. But then at the same time, like you're saying, Julie, by not doing certain exercises, that leaves out a great opportunity to then strengthen certain areas of your body. And what we find more times than not is the list of things that people choose to not do because of how it's making their body feels tends to grow over time. And what that means then is the different ways that they could go about stimulating their body to improve their strength and improve their function. Those ways tends to shrink over time. So they just end up doing kind of less and less and less and less. And the challenge with that is, look, if you're not actively trying to strengthen your body, if you're not actively trying to improve the function of your body, those things are going downhill. And when there's already a compromised system as far as like an arthritic joint or something like that, well, that process of going downhill tends to speed up, and it tends to get even faster. And, versus somebody that doesn't have, a compromised system in that regard. So it's really imperative that we figure out, okay, well, how can you go about doing different exercises in a way that, number one, does not flare up your knees and does not, make things worse, but number two, can continue to promote your strength and promote your function and promote your health overall. So the whole like downward spiral that so many people find themselves caught in is not a place where you find yourself.
Absolutely. So really the bottom line is you have to be weight training. And many of the people we talk to, at least, are doing things that are more cardio based, but you have to be weight training. That is the number one way that you're going to keep this joint strong. But as we have already talked about just previously about, there's things that, you're probably nervous about or might flare you up. The big catch here is how your strength training. And a lot of times people have this list like, oh, I can't do this exercise. Don't do knee extension. Don't do knee flexion. Don't do squats. Don't do whatever is on your don't list. I want you to take that list and check it with our next 3 steps. Most likely, you are not doing these 3 steps when you apply it to your weight training. And when you do apply these 3 steps to your exercises and weight training, you're going to see that some of the don't list, you can now put on your do list, which again is so important because we don't want to leave chunks of exercises out because that leaves areas weak and vulnerable to injury.
Absolutely. So I just want to give you a quick example before we dive into these 3 steps, because a lot of times when people hear about like you need to change how you're exercising, like it may not make sense, right away. So I want to just give a quick example to kind of highlight this. So I had a client, and going up and down the stairs would bother her knees. She had, an arthritic knee, and going up and down the stairs would bother her knee. So she changed how she was going about going up and down the stairs. So she would go down the stairs backwards, and going down the stairs backwards no longer bothered her knee. So that's just a simple change of like how you're going up and down the stairs. She didn't say, well, I can't go down the stairs, I can only go up. And so once I'm up for good. And, I'm just not going downstairs anymore until my knee feels better. It's like, no, she figured out that how she was going down the stairs needed to change in order for it to not bother her knee as much. And so that simple concept, it's what we want you to apply to all the other things on your I don't do list because they bother my knee. All right. And so whether it's squats or lunges or leg or whatever it is, whatever exercises are on your I don't do list because they bother my, my knee, I want you to start thinking about that stairs example and realize, okay, well, actually there's a different way you can go up and down the stairs. There are different ways you can go about doing these exercises such that they don't bother your knees anymore and you can still get the benefits of doing the exercise. So how do we go about doing this? Well, step number 1 is you need to start by checking your range of motion, okay? And a lot of times we give out the advice to check your range of motion on this podcast. And in this particular context, the reason for checking your range of motion is to see where your joints, specifically your knees, can move and they still feel good. Right? Where can you move your knees as far as like straightening your knees and bending your knees and they don't bother you, okay? And that's the part that you really want to cue in on this first step, when it comes to checking your range of motion.
Yes, checking your range of motion, that is huge. How do you do that? So some easy ways is just to move your joint without any weight. So sit in a chair, make sure the floor is not going to obstruct your motion, and you can just gently straighten your knee and see how straight it goes. You can bend your knee, see how bent it goes. You're also looking for not only like how far can it go, but how does it feel when I'm doing this? And taking mental notes of this, because a lot of times you have more motion than you think you do. Like we think like, oh, I have arthritic knee, I shouldn't do anything with my knees. Well, actually 90% of your motion is probably still feeling fine. I've seen people that have about 30% of their motion, and great, you got 30%. You can work and strengthen and increase your motion even with that 30% of motion. But anyways, find out where your body, specifically your knee, will move and will not move, and also notice symptoms when you're doing that. And that will lead us to step number 2, which is when you're weight training, when you're exercising, stay within the range of motion that feels symptom free and that stays within your maximum. So like, let's say you sat on a chair and you straighten your knee and bent your knee, and there was a range that was like symptom free and there was like a max range. You want to stay within the max range and within the symptom free range. And normally the symptom will come up first. So you're just looking for when does that symptom arise, and never go past that. Stay where it feels good.
Hey, Julie, the point that you brought up that I really, really like was the idea like it's okay to only use 30% of your range or whatever it is. I think a lot of times we get this picture in our head of like, well, this exercise there's supposed to be this much motion. And if I can't do that much motion or even close to that much motion, well, it just, it must not be benefiting me at all. And that's just not true, okay? Regardless of how much motion you are using when you're doing a leg extension or a leg curl or a leg press or whatever exercise you're doing, as long as that amount of motion is symptom free, you're going to get some kind of benefit from doing that exercise when you continue to follow these steps that we're laying out for you. All right. So I want to put that out there because I don't want you to have it in your head of like, okay, well, these steps are only good if I can, at least move half the range or whatever. And that's not the case. However much or little motion you can perform from a symptom-free perspective, you stay within that. And you know what's really cool is when you stay within that symptom-free range of motion, more times than not, that's when we start to see that people's bodies will actually allow them to move with more range of motion that is symptom-free. And that's one of the coolest things about this 3-step process that we see.
Yes. So let's apply this so that you can get like a good picture in your brain. So a lot of people are familiar with that knee straightening exercise called the knee extension. It's a machine and there's a bar that goes right on your shins and you straighten your knees and push the bar up. And that's kind of the exercise. So before you do that exercise, which is really important to do, especially if you have knee arthritis, because we really want to make sure your quads stay really strong. Quads are a huge controller of the knee and a huge contributor to the strength of your knee. So before you do it, you want to check your motion. So let's first check the motion. How straight can your knee go? And then we also want to know, where should this exercise start? So how bent does your knee go? Now, by checking both of those, we want to make sure we're respecting both of those. So how bent can your knee go? Find that out and then set the bar so that it's respectful of that. You don't want that bottom bar to be like shoving your knees back further than it can go. So a lot of knee extensions have adjustments if you're going to use that machine. And then as you do the range, slowly lift and make sure you're staying within the range that you are symptom free. Now, just as Charlie said, if you have 90% of your range, great. Strengthen that 90%. It's likely, if it's muscle based, that you're limited in that last 10%. You might regain that 10%. You might not, but you might regain that 10%. If you only have 30%, let's say you're just like lifting it 2 inches and putting it back down, lifting it 2 inches. I've done entire sessions where that's all we got that day, and that's great. That is where your body's saying you can go. And remember, there is giant benefits to doing that. I also find a lot of people are like kind of scared to do it, right? They're like, I've had bad experiences with this. I don't want to do it. Well, then great. Do that 30% or do whatever amount that you can do that you feel mentally and emotionally okay with. And then next time you've proved that you were okay with that. You don't even know how many times I've asked clients where I'm like, hey, why aren't you going further? Like, is something hurting you or is it your brain? Like, you're nervous about it. And they'll say, yeah, I'm just nervous about it. I'm like, cool. Well, let's do it here for a while. And then maybe later we won't be so nervous. But strengthening what you can is always beneficial.
Absolutely. All right. So the third step in this process is while you are doing the exercise, you need to keep your focus on squeezing your muscles. You need to keep your focus on that muscle contraction. I can't tell you how many times people do step 1 and step 2 pretty well, but then when it comes time for step 3, they get distracted with the motion, or they get distracted with, catching up on what happened over the weekend, or they get focused on the podcast they're listening to or whatever it is, but their focus drifts away from squeezing their muscles. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh gosh, this is hurting my knee. I can't do it. And it falls right back on the, I don't do this because it bothers my knee list. All right. So you need all 3 steps. You need to make sure this third step is in place of keeping your focus on squeezing your muscles. Okay, what this is going to do, a couple different things. Number 1, it's going to continuously reestablish that mind-muscle connection while you're doing the exercise. Why this is important is because number 1 is going to make sure that you don't move too far. Okay, remember, we want to stay within the symptom-free range of motion. So an easy way to blow through the symptom-free range of motion is by moving too far. But when you focus on squeezing your muscles, it will limit the likelihood that happens. Number 2, because you're going to be consistently just aware of what's happening with your muscles and really looking for that feedback from your body of how your body's doing while you're doing the exercise, you are going to sense what your body is telling you so much easier. Okay, if your body's saying, you know what, we shouldn't do another rep, like we don't need to do anymore, you'll be able to pick up on that so much sooner, and then you can change how you're doing the exercise in order to make sure that it still feels good for your body. Those 2 things, when you're talking about trying to exercise and strengthen your body and your joints may be a little bit compromised, you have some arthritis, something like that, making sure that you are staying within your symptom-free range of motion and making sure you are getting that feedback from your body, both of which by focusing on squeezing your muscles, that is a huge, huge component to making sure you feel well with your workouts.
You're right, Charlie. This last step, as I guess not important as it seems, is super important because you can't see focusing on contraction, right? It's all internal. It's like a thinking thing. It's a focus thing. But I actually just had a client and she loves to use her recumbent bike at home. And she was like, Julie, my arthritis has like flared up enough that I can barely use my bike at home. Like I don't even get on anymore because it's bothering me. And usually like if I get on the bike enough, then it like starts loosening up or whatever, but I just can't even get on. So it was crazy. Like she came in and within like 3 or 4 sessions, all we did was focus on contraction. We didn't even do any moving even. We would like move a little and squeeze and do a whole bunch of thinking and squeezing and connecting. And within those few sessions, she was able to like get back on her bike and do her stairs way more comfortable. So really thinking about the contraction when you're exercising, and this applies anywhere, right? So like on your knees or if you're doing squats or whatever, always connecting with your muscles really, really helps the exercise with its effectiveness and with its safety and with you doing the exercise properly. So don't undermine this step 3. So again, you want to be looking at your range of motion, staying where it's symptom free, and most importantly, focusing on the contraction when you're doing your weight training.
Now, what's the risk of not doing this? What's the risk of just continuously adding exercises and activities to your, I don't do this because it bothers my knee list? Well, number 1 is if you are not actively trying to strengthen your muscles and trying to improve your function, those things get worse, and they get worse faster the more compromised your system already is. Okay, so if you're not actively trying to improve the health and function of your body, it's going downhill, and it's going downhill more quickly if you have joints are arthritic and things like that. So that's number one. Like, we want to make sure that you continue to improve your strength, continue to improve your function, so you can keep doing the stuff in life that you want to do. But that really leads to number two, is as your list of things that you don't do because it bothers your knee continues to grow, then that means the list of things that you can do that doesn't bother your knees is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which means stuff that you want to be able to do in life, you're not able to do because your ability to do things is just going downhill. So that's why it's so important that we follow these 3 steps. Number 1, checking your range of motion. Number 2, staying within your symptom-free range of motion. And number 3, keeping your focus on the muscle contraction while you're doing the exercise. Because when you follow those 3 steps, not only will you give yourself a better chance of improving your strength and improving your function and doing so in a way that doesn't make your knees feel worse, but you will also be giving yourself the best chance possible to keep doing all the things in life that you want to do and not continue to put things on your I don't do this because it bothers my knee list. And that's really what we want for you, to be able to keep doing all the stuff that you want to do as long as you want to be able to do it.
That's right, Charlie. And really what we're looking to get out of strength training with your arthritic knee is to maximize the strength and motion that you have in that knee. Not only will it continue to help you stay functional and do as much as you can do with your knee, but it will protect your knee from further injury, from further decline. And really, if you have a diagnosis of arthritis in your knee, that means the structure of your knee is different than when it wasn't arthritic. But really, everyone in their body has different structures in their joints than what was originally there. A lot of people have arthritis and they have no idea. So really, any time that you're feeling something funky in your knee or in any joint, we're just trying to maximize the strength and function given what we've got, right? And we never have like a 24/7 x-ray going on in our body. We don't always know what's inside, but we do know that we can always be maximizing the strength and function of our knees, of all of our joints. So just keep that in mind. Don't use arthritis as like your clutch of like, oh, well, that's why I don't weight train. That's why I don't walk. That's why I don't ride my bike. That's why I don't do, exercise. It just hurts my knees. I've got bad knees. So many people say they have bad knees. So many people have bad knees and are very functional. So use your weight training to maximize what you have, because your muscles are changeable. They're quickly changeable. And we can use that to our advantage and use that to live your best life.
Absolutely. So if you're looking for, okay, well, this practical application of the 3-step process is awesome, but like, how do I continue to apply more of what I'm learning on this podcast? Then one thing that you would highly recommend doing is signing up to join our Exercise for Life Secrets training. This happens multiple times throughout the week, and it's going to give you the top 3 things that you need to know in order to make sure that you can exercise for life. So all you have to do to get registered for this free training is go to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. Choose the time that works best for you, but make sure to show up on time, because all of our sessions have been maxing out and we predict that they will continue to max out. So just go to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com to join in on one of our upcoming trainings, and we can't wait to see you there. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that's limiting what they do with their workouts and throughout their life because their knees are not feeling well? Share this episode with them so they can learn about this simple 3-step process that they can start applying to their own workouts to help make sure that not only are they able to improve their function and improve their strength, but also minimize the risk that they are furthering the degradation of their knees. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So what did you think about that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you would like some more in-depth guidance on applying this kind of information to your own workouts, make sure to sign up for the upcoming One Workout Away Challenge. You can get registered by going to owa.matschaumburg.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.